Okay, good evening, everyone. So just to remind ourselves, we were looking at Tosfos im Zarka Mivod Yom, L'Ashba Asura, and Tosfos' question is really, does this mean to say that, sorry, the Gemara says, Rav Papa says, that Elomeata Zorik Le'Levi Mahachanam Asa, is the Gemara saying that when you throw a keli into the ashba, it ceases, it becomes Muktza? The Papa says, no, we're talking about where you zorak it me, the idea you threw it away on Erev Shabbos. And Tosfos says, now that we're talking on Erev Shabbos, there's no question from the beged. And we weren't sure exactly what Tosfos' answer meant. If there's a comparison between this this Magofus and the Magofa and the Beged, if you throw it away on Shabbos, why is there no comparison if you throw it away before Shabbos? And the basic answer we gave, I saw this brought in the name of, as I said, Rav Chatzkel, but it's an important aside either way that emerges throughout the sugas, even though we've successfully avoided it till now, is that with respect to Muktza, in other words, a person making a decision that something should no longer be Muchan, Legabe that we say, Ein Muktza Chatzi Shabbos. In other words, the whole lomdus of Muktza is that if it's not Muchan when Shabbos comes in, it can't become Muchan on Shabbos. And if it is Muchan when Shabbos comes in, it remains Muchan. So if we were talking about throwing it away on Shabbos, the Gemara understood that it must mean that you are making it cease to be a keli. Throwing something away, we don't say Botla Data, we don't say this is subjective just to you as an individual and not to everyone else. No, it ceases to be a keli. In that case, even if you throw away a beged, it should cease to be a keli on Shabbos. However, now that Rav Papa answers that we're talking about that you throw it away before Shabbos, so if you're throwing it away before Shabbos, you're not necessarily saying it is a keli, it's not a keli. You're saying whether it's muchan or not muchan. With respect to muchan or not muchan, there it makes sense to say that a beged is muchan. How can a beged not be muchan? Of course, a beged is muchan, and only the weaker keli of a magofa. So, like there, the throwing away could a shard of cheres. There, the throwing away could be the determinant about whether it's that could be determinant of whether it's muchan or not. So that's the structure that we said until now. The only thing that we ran out of time really was that the language of the Shulchan Aruch it doesn't fit this theory, and I printed the Shulchan Aruch in source source 2 on page 2. The Shulchan Aruch says, I hope I printed the right one. In Shin Ches Sif Zayin, the Shulchan Aruch really brings this in, and the Shulchan Aruch's language is Im Zarka L'Ashma B'Vayid Yom Kiven Shabbat Lo Miyos Kli, and so on. So the Chatichas Cheres Shenishba B'Chol Mikli V'Oy L'Chasos B'Kli Mutzah L'Taltala Fili B'Makom Shein Kelim Mitzvim Misham V'Zarka L'Ashma B'Vayid Yom also L'Taltala Kiven Shabbat Lo Miyos Oid Kli, since it's bottled from being a Kli. That's the language of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch understands that the throwing it away even on Erev Shabbos is a bittul in the same kli. It's not that you're saying that this is a kli, but it ceased to do muchan. You're saying it's not a shame kli. So the Shulchan Aruch doesn't seem to the language of Shulchan Aruch doesn't imply like this this idea that we just suggested. Yeah.
Like you be that someone else would happily take something out of a rubbish bin, or someone else bin, you could say that's quite a usable object, but maybe I'll use it.
No, this is this halacha. It's saying that since you, the owner, determined that it's not it's not a kli for you, it ceases to be a kli. That's yes, that's what Shulchan Aruch is saying, and that's really now Rav Papa's question. Well, in that case, even if you throw away a klima, it should stop being a kli. So our answer to that question was no. The maskana of the Gemara is we're not talking about stopping it being a kli. Just saying it's not muchan for me. That's easier to understand. but the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say it wasn't medayik in his words, or doesn't say it fit with this diuk. Shulchan Aruch seems to be saying that when you throw it away, you're making it not a kli.
Well,
Yeah.
what can you say that there's a difference between a chatichat cheres to a glima? A chatichat cheres, when you throw it away, is viewed not as a kli, but a glima is.
You could say it's such a svara that chatichas kares that's thrown away isn't a kli and a glima is, but the Gemara says not like that because Rav Papa asked them that why maskav Rav Papa enemy ata zorik leili glima chanamid asa. But why should there be a difference between Shabbos and Erev Shabbos? That's Tosfos sort of asked the question. He doesn't explain to us what his answer is. So in other words, you could have said Tosfos Svara that a real keli, how does you're throwing away make it not a kli? But on that the Gemara says no. The Shulchan Aruch says no. You throw away this keli, and you can redefine it as not being a keli. I don't know. That's yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's either way. That sort of takes us where I wanted really to get up on Sunday. I want to learn the sugya of Krumish Machzeles at the top of Kuf Chav Hey Amud Aleph. Is everyone clear with where we've left things? But basically, we've introduced for the first time an important idea that we've successfully evaded till now. That there's two separate nidonim that you always have to say. One is I've got something which is a keli. Can I make it muchan or not muchan? And that's hilchas muktza. That's pure hilchas muktza. And that would that we normally the klal would be ein muktza lechatzi Shabbos. You can't be muktza something in the middle of Shabbos. But if the underlying fabric of the object changes, then its status will change on Shabbos. If in the middle of Shabbos it ceases to be a kli, then of course its status can change on Shabbos. The way we understood the Gemara is that there's no reason something can or can't. Why should something not change? Why should Shabbos be different to weekday with respect to making it a kli or making it cease to be a kli? Why on Shabbos should an owner not be able to redefine something as not being a kli? Muktza is determined before Shabbos, but whether it is a kli or not, why should that be determined? Shulchan Aruch says not like that. The Shulchan Aruch says that on Shabbos, if you throw away, it doesn't change its status as a kli. If on Friday you throw it away, it does change its status as a kli. Well, I don't really understand the logic of why there should be a difference, but that's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and he says that the throwing away is making it affecting its kli status, not just affecting its haktar. Yeah.
Just, one further point I think you might touch on would be about what about where you throw it away? Is there a difference between throwing it in a waste paper basket in your room that's actually fairly clean and you might well be able to retrieve it and throwing it in a sort of communal dung heap in your chutzner?
Yes. Okay. So I was going to miss this out, but since you're asking about it, there is a BR Halacha in which I printed in honor of your question, but I decided now in the interest of time we're going to miss it out. BR Halacha is on page 3, Divrei Masechet Ashba, and he says Nired Zal Ashba Lav Dafka. The bin is Lav Dafka to Huadin Im Zakum Pesach Beiser Chayiv. If you threw it into the street, so it's not sitting with the rubbish getting contaminated. The point is you're throwing it out. You're not interested in it. That's already enough to make it cease to be a kli. But Uchot Milson Nokat, and it's just a common example. The Inderech Lezek Lechayiv Makom Hilach Bnei Adam. It's not normal to chuck things out into the street where people walk. But in a if you throw it into the street, that would be the same. And then he says, until that could be also the same. Yeah, you could argue, you could say if you put it outside your front door for people to pick up, that could be different. So you're not saying it's not a kli. You're saying I don't want it, but I want it to be I want it to be a kli. But you could make such arguments also. Yeah.
You say this more about why you make it not free on Shabbos this part. Is that maybe connected with much of a practice or the opposite of doing something to an object, even if it's not physically, but you're trying to do something to it on Shabbos, which you can't do it?
I'm not aware of. First of all, Makam Patrish means making something not a keli into a kli. Yours would be maybe soisa, like Mavatal Klime Hechana you can't do on Shabbos. The problem is, where do we see halacha that you can't change its status? We don't find such a gezerah or takana that you can't decide not to use something on Shabbos and therefore stop it being a KD. And why? And if there was such a takana, if you did it, it would still be effective. Maybe it would be also to do. So we don't find such halacha. We find that Muktza status can't change on Shabbos. I don't know where we find halacha that KD status can't change on Shabbos. I mean, if something ceases to be a KD, why shouldn't it cease to be a KD? I hear your svara that you could imagine that this is Kain making something, miyachid something for KD or removing the ichot as a KD is some sort of bono soisa or makav patchish type thing, but I haven't heard such thing, and why should it not be effective? Okay, so anyway, that takes us to the top of Kuf Chaf Yom Aleph. Kumis shel machzeles mutzah l'taltzul b'Shabbos. My tama. Omar Rav Bamduri Asbuli. Omar Rav, I'm sorry. Bamduri Asbuli. Machzeles gufa l'may chazulik suybe. Afro haninami chazulik suybe znofus. So the Gemara is saying that this machzeles which peels apart. So you're just left with reeds, not with or membrane, not with a not a proper mat. Sorry, thank you. There was a posh word to that. Not with a mat. Is not Muktza because you can still use it to cover things with it. The machzeles is used, the mat is used to cover dust, and this can also be used to cover dirt. So Tosas in that comments that machzeles gufa l'may chazia l'rav chetmilsa mefarish hachi avagav d'leiboy me'in melach rishona. So really, all the Gemara needed to say was that the broken reeds have some use. It doesn't have to have me'in melach rishona. It doesn't have to have the same use as the machzeles originally had. That was our Mishna really on That's the whole debate, and then Tosfos proves that Rav Nachman himself agrees with that, and the Maharsha picks up on why you need to prove anything. And Rav Nachman, we won't focus on that. Okay, so just to summarize, Tosfos proves that Rav Nachman doesn't holds like the Mishnah that you don't need me'ein melachto. It's enough that it does me'ein melachto, that it does any work. In which case, why does he say that it needs to do me'ein melachto? The Maharsha discusses whether Tosfos had to bring from Rav Nachman or not, but either way, Rav Nachman, that's what Rav Nachman holds. On Tosfos Enochnami to Rav Chetamilsa, that Bamduri is really saying a stronger point. Bamduri is saying it's so much a continuation of what it originally was. It's literally got the same melacha. It's me'in melacha, and therefore there's nothing to talk about. So there's two things really. One is this is a little bit of a doichik in the lashon of the Gemara. That's one kash on Tosfos, and the second kash on Tosfos is it's difficult to know what the chiddush of the sugya is. Basically, it's yet another sugya just telling us that if something does me'ein melachta, it's enough. It's difficult to determine exactly why was Rava. Why is the Gemara saying my tama? Why are we bothered by the reason, and why does he need to say it? I mean, this is a classic halacha. It's got me'ein melachta, so of course it should be okay. It's difficult to understand. So the Rishonim, and I printed them, give different answers really to Tosfos' kasha, and I just want to go through them, and they avoid this issue. The Rashba says that let's learn the Rashba actually, because the Rashba here deserves quite a lot of Ian. Basically, the Rashba says an answer. The Meiri brings three answers to the question. The Meiri's third answer is Tosfos, the Rav Chetamilsa. The Meiri's second answer is a version of the Rashba, I think is phrased differently, but I think identical in style to the Rashba. And the Meiri's first answer we'll look at as a separate answer, but that's just so everyone has clear the structure of what we're learning over here. So I think the Rashba deserves learning a little bit. Ian. Harta Omer Shmuel Krumish Shel Konim Mutzah Tzaltum Shabbos. Ik command him farish the dafka b'shenishma b'Shabbos. Ha b'choil loy. That if they break on chol not, why? Mishum de'in adam matznion and azarkan ashbo miyachtan l'hasaka. No one puts these aside. Broken reeds are useless. Therefore, you throw them away. Translation of Rashba, that these are like avonim and sororus. they're just twigs. A broken reed is just a broken reed. It's got no significance at all. Remember in the previous sugya we saw the svara that something which is just a stone or a stick, even though you can use it to cover things with, there's nothing particular about it that makes that you should do it. And therefore, the fact that it has a use of being covered, that you could use it to cover dirt with, is not enough. I mean, you can use any stone to cover dirt with. Therefore, he says, if it was Nishba on Erev Shabbos, all you have is a twig, a stone, a piece of rubble. A piece of rubble no one keeps is Muktza. However, Miu b'Nishba Shabbos. Here we're talking about where it's Nishba on Shabbos. V'huchanu agavaviyim. And therefore it was Muchan through the Machzeles. And therefore, Hashtanami chazin melachton rishona shori. If it's still got the original job, it's shori. If it doesn't have its original job, not. Even though you can still use it to cover dirt, that wouldn't be enough if that wasn't me'ein melachta rishona. Since in the weekday you throw it out so you burn it, therefore that's meaningless. It's just a stone. A stone that's chazi to cover tenufa doesn't mean that the stone's not muktzah. And then he finally finished off. That's why Bahamduri had to tell us this chiddush. In other words, the svara of the Rashba is, excuse me, that if it wouldn't do me'in melacha, or let's go the other round, if it does me'in melacha, if it does like the original melacha, so the original hachana remains. When Shabbos came in, it was muchan agavavian. The Machzeles was muchan. Has that hachana gone? The answer is no, that hachana has not gone, because it's still muchan for exactly the same thing. And now we have the principle that hachana doesn't evaporate on Shabbos, or to put that differently, you don't have haktar le chatzi Shabbos, and therefore the original hachana remains. However, if it were to lose the original hachana and it would be a new hishtamshus, that wouldn't be full foul of the principle that things don't become muktza on Shabbos, because it's not that I'm being muktza it for chatzi Shabbos, it's lost that hachana, it no longer has that functionality. So of course, if it doesn't have that functionality, how can it not be muktzah? That's the chiddush of the Rashba. So if it breaks before Shabbos, it's before Shabbos things can cease to be muchan, and therefore it would be like a stone or a piece of rubble, for which the normal thing is to chuck out or to burn, and it's not made for this. The hishtamshus are covering dirt with. You can use anything to cover dirt. However, if it only broke on Shabbos, where it was muchan at the start of Shabbos, the whole lumdus of Shabbos is that it doesn't lose its hachana. So if it still has that functionality, it remains muchan for that. If it's lost that functionality and you want to argue it's got a different functionality, that's not our previous sugya of the Mishna. The previous sugya is something which has a specificity to it. It's something specific. It's something that you would use for that. Here it's just a stone or a twig. A stone or a twig isn't omed for this particular thing. So I hope this is reminiscent of the earlier Rashba that we learned in the previous sugya also, which had a similar sort of svara. Is everyone with me on this? Yeah, am I? Sort of.
The Heres does not go down to this very lowly status of stone / twig, because it's still more harsh than
correct. Yes, that's what the Rashba said in the previous sugya, that it's still a kedi, and therefore, if it's muchan a kedi that has, according to Rabbi Shimon, let's go with the Tanakama, a kedi that has a use is not muktza. Here, it's a twig that has a use. Well, all twigs and all stones have uses. That doesn't make it muchan from Erev Shabbos. So Bahamduri is teaching us now a new halacha, that even though it's a twig or a stone, but nonetheless, if it has the old functionality, it doesn't lose its hachana on Shabbos, because something that's muchan at the beginning of Shabbos remains muchan for the whole of Shabbos. But to give it a new hishtamshus, that you can't do, because what would give it a new hishtamshus? It's not muchan, and it's not something that is omed for, that it has unique properties, such that we say it's omed for any hishtamshus.
what's that? If I took a stone and I designate it as a paperweight, it's paperweight, it's moved on.
Yes,
So if I've got a mat,
yes.
that breaks, and I'm now saying that it's the same as a stone or a stick.
Therefore, if it keeps its original functionality, it would still be muchen because things remain muchen for the whole of Shabbos. If it loses the original ishtamshus, then it's not muchen because the original hachana has gone. You want to make it omeid for something new, there's nothing there to make it omeid for that. It's no different to any other stick or stone.
But if a heves broke into a stone, and it had the same function as that original heves, the same halacha would.
Correct, yes. And that was really the Rashba's point in the previous sukkah in Amud Aleph, in Kuf Chaf Daled Amud Beis, I'm sorry, that if the cheres broke such that it was indistinguishable from a stone, then Enochanami would say the same. So there's nothing that makes it Muchan. Rafi.
So I thought this case, this change in the use. Because originally it was split into cover offer, and now it's to complex. It's not like exactly the same.
The Rishonim understand that's called Kein Melachto. That's similar enough use that that's not called a new functionality.
Oh, and Rashi had to say so. In his example, Rashi, you didn't just say oh, he says so as well in Rashi to make it maybe clearer.
I don't know. I didn't. I hear your point. I didn't notice that Rashi. I didn't think about the Rashi. Yes. In which case, he's saying it's mamish the continuation of the same thing. I didn't think about the Rashi. I just saw Tosfos and all the Rishonim all take it as given that this is called Me'in Melachto. You're right. You could have thought an answer that this is Me'in Melach Acheres, but I mean, it sounds like Rav is saying this point. He says, "Machzeles gufen or my chazon ksuba afra hanami chazon ksuba." But to notice, he does seem to be spelling that out that that's called Me'in Melachto. But anyway, so
I just wondered whether it's Rava who's getting the explanation. So, and Rava needs the explanation of Me'in Melachtam. So, in the Gemara, because he only accepts Me'in Melachtam.
I don't know the matter of the sugya well enough to know if that statement is substantiated. Is that correct?
Well, I'm just saying
So who?
Is explaining it to Rava. It's a Rava is saying he explained it to me, and he's explaining it in terms which Rava will follow.
The Mashal points out that this is the Rava, but is that the math that he's saying in the sugya?
Looking at the Gemara text itself.
I think the point the Mashal is making is that Rav is quoting Bar Hamduri, and Bar Hamduri are quoting Shmuel, and therefore he doesn't want to go with that Lomdus. I think that's a summary of the Mashal's point, that in Rava alone you could say that, but Rava is quoting Bar Hamduri or Shmuel, and Rava, and therefore that would be insufficient to answer it. Yeah, that seems the Mashal's point. Okay. So that's the Rashba's answer to the question. The Meiri, let's learn the Meiri also. Shiur machzelos shabbat Muktza tatum Shabbos kshem shmachzelos atzma yisrael lechasas ba'afa kacha shirai mu'um lekach gam kein or kiyetz ve'edu. Yeshonim they brings Tosfos mahutzvach lekeim lachto rishona v'haloi din dayu k'shehiroi l'shum melach haklal shari einon zvichim lekeim melachton. V'yesh metatzim. This is his first answer now. Shekol shuru'in lekein melachton, mutzah letaltzlon kedin kenim shleimim. Anything that is royu for me'in melachton, you can move them like kenim shleimim. Avalim ein oisin kein melachton, afal pisha ein oisin kein melacha, even though they're doing me'in melacha acheres, ein netonin and tzorich oisa inyan she'me'unay achshav. So the Meiri's first answer is that if they do me'in melachton, then they're not muktzah at all. If they just do me'in melacha, then they're analogous to klish melachta le'issa. They'd be mutter l'tzorich gufay, but not stum to move them around. You wouldn't be able to move them mechamed itself. In other words, he translates the Mishna of seemingly of kol hakelim and netonim Shabbos shivim netonim roim v'achi yosing me'in melacha to mean that the Mishna's chiddush is that it doesn't become Muktza machmas gufay now that it's broken. And therefore it's enough that it does a melacha, and therefore you can move it l'tzorech gufay. But not that you can move it mecham l'tel, not that it's completely not mutter. That's the Meiri's first answer. And he rejects this answer. We'll come back to that in a minute. He says he doesn't agree with that. And then his second answer, I think, is analogous to the Rashba. He says, since the Machteres beforehand was merely reeds which were omen in the Sreifa, therefore Yisisavo, I would think, she'afshin is farmu, even though they are nisparim, even though it falls apart, it should go back to its original state, and therefore Bavalomed, Shemacha Shu'una Kein Melachton, Dinin Kedin HaMachzeres Hatzman. Since they are roy Kedin Melachton, therefore the din is like Machzeres itself. So I think what he's saying, actually now I'm reading it, I'm thinking it's maybe a little bit different to the Rashba. The point he's saying is that I read it originally. I'll say how I originally read it and how actually as I'm rereading it, I'm thinking he might be saying. He says, what is Machzeres? Machzeres is collected twigs. So before it became Machzeres, what was it? It was just twigs. Twigs are twigs. Now it became Machzeres, great. And now it's gone back to being twigs. Going back to twigs is going back to twigs. It shouldn't, why should it have the milah of a Kelim? Therefore, you would have thought it goes back to being Muktza, Kamash Malon, and I think here I misread it, like the Rashba says, okay, but it's still Muchan for Ka'in Tashmishay, and therefore the Hachana doesn't evaporate. Now I'm rereading it, I think he's saying something stronger. He seems to be saying the Shem Kelim doesn't evaporate. Don't say that Machzeres that falls apart goes back being twigs. No, it goes back to being a broken Kelim. That's his second answer. And his third answer, which I won't read inside, is that's correct. Like the Machzalat Atzman. Yeah, that's why I'm changing what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly right. Yes. So you know what? Let's just read it again, just as we get a good reading in the Rishon. Since the Machteres before it was made, it was just twigs that were owned for Sreifa. Therefore, I thought even when it falls apart, they go back to the original state. Comes to teach us, since the Oile came Melachton, the din is like a Machteres itself. Translation, it remains a Kelim. The Rashba says it's not like the Machteres itself. It's Muchan. It remains Muchan. I think the Meiri is saying something stronger. It's a broken Machteres. It's not just the twig anymore. So when you ask yourself, what is this? The Rashba would say this is a Machteres, a twig, and the Meiri would say this is a Machteres. I think there would be enough coming if it broke on Erev Shabbos. The Rashba said if it broke on Erev Shabbos, so it ceases to be Muchan, and now it's a twig. The Meiri would say no, on Erev Shabbos it's still a broken Kelim. Yeah. And the first answer. No, either way you can use it for any malacha. In the first answer, it said you can only move it l'sorech gufay. In the second answer, no, it's muchan, so it's not muktza at all. No, I don't think that's true. According to Rashba, I think you could use it for anything. Why not? It's not muktza because it's muchan for me'ein malachtai, and therefore you can use it for anything you want. The first answer to the Meiri is the only one that says this is the Klisha Melachta L'Issa, equivalent to Klisha Melachta L'Issa. The second answer to the Meiri and the Rashba and everyone else is learning it's muchan, so it's muchan is muchan.
Reminds me of the death of bread.
It is a sort of similar thing, yeah. The death of Kelim. To what degree do statuses, maybe the plural status is statusi, I don't know, linger? To what degree do they linger? Yeah. Because what you have is you have two identical twigs in front of you. The only difference between the two is history. One was part of the Machteres and the other one was never made into Machteres. One we say, it's a twig, piece of rubbish. The other one we say, broken piece of Kelim, therefore has the status of a Kelim. Yeah. Now, the Rashba, I understand. The Rashba says, Enochlam is identical to its sister twig. But that's the halacha. Hachana is a chalos. That's chal. We mentioned this right at the beginning of the video. Hachana is chal on Shabbos and it doesn't change. But a Shem Kelim is not a chalos. So why should that not evaporate in Shabbos? No, even a Shem Kelim says you are miyachid it for human use. So this remains a twig that you made into your slave, and therefore it remains with its Kelim status. You remember when we spoke about Hachana being a chalos, right at the beginning of the Sukkah, when the Gemara had the Havamina, that Omer V'Yodam Shmuel Melachot Shenishmu Erev Shabbos. Masav Melachta Nimei Melacha Acheres. So Masav Afinu Melacha Acheres, etc. Al Nishmu Shabbos. Aval. Let me get this right. Al Nishmu Shabbos Tifra Kol Matorin Hol Mechonim Al Gavei Avim. So Gemara the Havamina that something that breaks on Shabbos remains Muchon Al Gavei Avim according to everyone. In other words, it's Chol. The status of something is determined Chol on at the beginning of Shabbos, and that remains its status. Just for the sake of completion, the third answer maybe is like the Tosfos. He says, "L'rafcha to Milsa." We'll stop here because we've finished our time. I appreciate that. All of this might be a little confusing, but I hope I've taken you through the Rishonim. That on Sunday you can revisit the Rishonim and hopefully see how we're learning these Rishonim. Thank you very much for joining me as always.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you very much, Shafi.